And welcome to the Oddity Archive, the show that openly loves its comedy forefathers, and mothers, of course, as well. But we're also not afraid to acknowledge that even the greats had their share of misfires. So with that, yeah, I think it's high time I unleashed another round of bad sitcoms. And as always, I've cherry-picked 3 for us to look at here. And these are all especially short-lived ones today. None of these made it any longer than 13 episodes. And 2 out of the 3 didn't even get all of the episodes made shown. So anyway, I got 1 from the 70s for you and 2 from the 80s. And these all come from some of the generally acknowledged greats of comedy, be it comic actors or writers or a little of both, whatever it might be. But as we're going to see, even the comedy gods have their off days.
There'll be no resting in peace, nearly departed.
Grant and Claire died in a rock slide. That's how they made headlines.
We're dead and we'll just have to live with it.
Now they're ghostly hosts
Grant, where are you?
who can't be seen.
Prior to hitting the commercial, if less than creative, jackpot with Spam-A-Lot, Eric Idle seemed to be the member of Monty Python who never really found his place after the TV series ended. And today's first sitcom is one of the many stops along the way. Having said that, in my opinion, this show is far and away the best of today's lot. Nearly Departed, which ran on NBC for less than a month in the spring of 1989. By the way, this is one of those shows where the theme song way over-explains the show's premise. Although, in the case of Eric Idle, that would be kind of on brand, wouldn't it?
Nearly departed. It's hard to believe there's a family of 3 running amok in our home. They're constantly near us, they can't see or hear us.
Nearly Departed seems to be an incredibly loose adaptation of the 1926 book and subsequent 1937 movie Topper. For the uninitiated, Topper was about an irresponsible rich couple that gets themselves killed in a car wreck, which get stuck on Earth, read Purgatory, and get stuck sharing their old home with an uptight new couple. For this show, it's a somewhat uptight couple that gets killed in a freak car wreck, and the new occupants of their old home are a rather uncouth, nouveau riche, if you will, family. Come to think of it, it's a bit like if Topper and Beetlejuice got mashed together, just minus the horror element.
You and your band of snivelling, middling, freeloading, knitting, whittling spitters. Oh, will you shut up? I know he's a pain in the butt. Is he stupid, too?
Grant, he can see us.
That's impossible. How can you see us? We're dead.
Big deal. I'm 75 and don't feel so good myself.
Like I lamented throughout the bad movie-based sitcoms episode, this is another one of those sitcoms that works well as a one-off, like a movie, but not so well as a regular series. The premise is just too thin and the characters too one-note for any kind of longevity. Having said that, for what it is, I think both the writers and performers knew the deal, and they, rightly, never take themselves too seriously. Couple that with some solid jokes here and there, and, well, it's still kind of a dud, but at least it's a watchable dud. At its best, Nearly Departed winds up feeling like if the Monty Python gang did some kind of recurring sitcom parody. At its worst, it's a bunch of coked-out 80s sitcom cliches strung together.
No, E.
Oh, E, not D.
Oh.
U. V. W.
On that note, when it fails, it's generally because it doesn't always play by its own ground rules. The chief example involves the grandfather character, who, like Winona Ryder's character in Beetlejuice, can, for the sake of plot convenience, see and hear the deceased couple. But as seen in that last bit, Idol had no reason whatsoever to act out the letters on the eye exam. At other times, the deceased couple talk and act as if the grandfather character can't hear them, with him well within earshot. When that sort of thing happens, it feels less postmodern and more like lazy writing.
I have a great body, too. You know, you should check mine out. It's at plot 17, Cliffside Cemetery.
As mentioned earlier, this show lasted for less than 1 month. 6 episodes were made, but only the first 4 were broadcast. In the US, at least. The Brits and the Aussies were treated to the last 2, in one of which we get to see Eric Idle's character portray his own aunt. And it goes exactly how you would expect.
No! She's fainted. Now what are we gonna do?
I don't know, but I'm not giving her mouth-to-mouth resuscitation.
Goodbye, Grant. I love you, too. Goodbye, Aunt Millie. It's been great having a chance to talk to you.
Unsurprisingly, Idle wound up resuming his 20 years or so worth of being stuck playing the dumb British guy in family movies after this series.
Just pushing up daisies, we're halfway to Hades and halfway to heaven above. Nothing like being in love, dear, nearly departed.
When I read Tim Conway's autobiography several years ago, the one anecdote from it that always stood out to me was Tim, rather self-deprecatingly, discussing the vanity plate on his car, which read 13 weeks, as in out of the 6 TV series that Conway was leading man in, with one exception, none lasted longer than 13 episodes. And the one that did, the Western spoof Rango, only lasted 17 episodes. Still not quite a whole regular season for an American series. Now, for the record, I love Tim Conway. I must have watched, corny and kind of choppy as they are, the Dorf on Golf or whatever other sport videos about 1 million times as a kid. I also partially grew up on the Carol Burnett and Friends reruns and Carol's short line of VHS compilations. But the cold hard truth was that Tim Conway just wasn't much of a leading man. He could command sketches okay, but for a real show, he really needed an Ernest Borgnine or a Carol Burnett or a Harvey Korman to bounce off of. Left to his own devices, especially when coupled with weak source material, it's a total disaster. Chief among those disasters, in my opinion, would be The Tim Conway Show, which lasted 13 episodes. All aired in the first half of 1970 on CBS.
Bills and bills. Don't we ever get anything around here but bills? Hanger rents.
The basic premise of the show was that Conway's character and buddy Herb Kenworth, played by Conway's old McHale's Navy cohort Joe Flynn, run a single-plane charter flight service called AAA Airlines, presumably a little play on the AAA auto insurance company. Anyway, given Conway's career of playing incompetent ne'er-do-wells and incompetent ne'er-do-wells, it should come as no shock whatsoever that Conway plays an inept pilot. Joe Flynn more or less just reprises his role from McHale's Navy, just now working with the goofballs instead of against them.
Lunch seems to be crying. A baby lunch. There's a baby. What?
Aside from Conway and Flynn, we've got a rather stereotypical bunch of sitcom supporting characters. There's the goofy diner owner, there's the employee of a competing airline who functions as an at best perfunctory romantic interest for Conway's character, but the most baffling has to be the much more successful aforementioned competing airline operating out of the same airport, Crawford Airlines. Crawford Airlines, seemingly for the sake of plot convenience, is run by a stuffy old businesswoman and her sycophantic son, who managed to simultaneously own the loan to AAA's one and only airplane and want to, for no good reason whatsoever, run the too small to be a threat competing airline out of business.
All my years in the Postal Service that I've ever awarded a mail contract without a single competitive bid.
That's quite understandable, Mr. Prentice. At Crawford Field, there simply is no competition.
As of my making this, there are only 2 episodes of this series floating around online. Both very late period, probably small market, black and white kinescopes. The show initially aired in color. To me, both episodes feel like would-be decent 5-minute sketches stretched out to 25 excruciating minutes apiece. To make matters worse, in stretching out these ideas, the writers had to continually contrive more dumb moves for the 2 leads to make. And these contrivances were so poor that I found myself cursing at the screen throughout most of the All Our Aircraft Is Missing episode. And while Conway and Flynn were both perfectly capable of physical comedy, it's not enough to get the show across the finish line. Lord knows the writing isn't. And it's kind of a shame because the 2 leads had a pretty solid chemistry. It just looks like nobody believed in the show enough to put in the proper effort. Unfortunately, this wouldn't be the only time that Conway would get saddled with a solid basic concept, but poor writing. Ace Crawford Private Eye, anyone?
Saying yes I can, and every day is better than before.
It's so good having you here. Oh, I'm in Grandma heaven.
We've loved Lucy for over 30 years. Now get ready. The Queen of Comedy is back.
Let's finish with the truly notorious one. And yes, I know a handful of other YouTubers have already covered it, and I intentionally have not watched any of those videos. Anyway, my understanding is that after Lucille Ball's previous sitcom, Here's Lucy, ended in 1974, Lucy remained under contract to CBS, then, for a little while at least, NBC, but wound up under both networks being relegated to nothing but one-offs for over a decade. In 1986, apparently missing having a day-to-day project to work on, Lucy, husband Gary Morton, and producer extraordinaire Aaron Spelling joined forces to get Lucy a new sitcom, and ABC took the bait, giving Ball and her husband a combined $250,000 per episode, and total creative control. Oh yeah, and I think both Lucy and ABC saw dollar signs in their eyes from the success of this other little series going on at the time, this little thing called The Golden Girls. Okay, stick with me here. Life with Lucy, pretty bafflingly, finds Lucy playing a recent widow whose husband owned 50% interest in a hardware store, which she never had any interest in the operation thereof. The business partner's son is married to Lucy's daughter, and that younger couple, their own 2 children, and the old business partner all live together. Seemingly for the sake of plot convenience, Lucy moves in with this lot and proceeds to assert her inherited 50% control of the hardware store to boot. And that's the simple version.
ABC series. For over 10 years, he's played her boss, but in real life, the 2 of them are true blue friends. with mutual respect and a deep admiration, as you'll see, as Denise talks to Lucy.
Chemistry. There are times when people meet and you can almost anticipate what they're doing.
Life with Lucy seems to be an exercise in personal nostalgia on Lucille Ball's part more than anything else. For the occasion, Lucy recruited Gale Gordon, who'd been her most regular sitcom foil since 1963, to be her leading man. She also brought back her main writers and even some of the same stage crew members she'd been working with as far back as the late 40s. And I get the feeling a lot of the scripts were recycled ones from the 50s, just with the cultural references updated, and not entirely understood by the writers or older performers. To make matters worse, the supporting cast turn in poor performances across the board. Coupled with the saccharine tone that the show takes at times, Life with Lucy occasionally feels more like a grotesque parody of a 50s sitcom. Okay, time to play my customary Monday morning quarterback role here. I think the number one problem Life with Lucy had was that Lucy was still confining herself to the same roles she'd begun in earnest back in the 40s, with the only real bit of evolution being the odd flash of self-realization that she's a grandmother now, and even that never feels too honest. Her character also manages to shave about 15 years off of Lucille Ball's actual age, and it is not treated as a joke. If it were me, given Lucille Ball's longtime status as a businesswoman, I think I would have suggested getting Lucy to assume the role of the longtime hardware store owner trying to cope with everyone else. If nothing else, it would have fit better with the somewhat more gruff public persona she'd developed by this point, and fit better with her, by this point, completely cigarette-ravaged voice. Also, I'd have advised laying off the physical humor completely. Neither Lucy nor Gale Gordon, ages 75 and 80, respectively, looked robust enough by this point to be doing pratfalls. The times they did attempt it, I felt like I was about to helplessly watch one or both of them break a hip. Each subsequent sitcom Lucille Ball did after I Love Lucy had already been a case of diminishing returns, both creatively and commercially. So perhaps unsurprisingly, Life with Lucy peaked right out of the gate, with the premiere episode reaching the lower rungs of the Nielsen Top 25 for the week, with a precipitous drop to the bottom rungs of the Nielsen's in general within a few weeks. The series had been picked up for an initial 13 episodes, and all 13 got made, but only 8 were aired. The remaining 5 episodes only saw the light of day when the series was released on DVD in 2019. I'm sure some will argue with me, but I consider Life with Lucy to be a depressing and undeserved end to a pretty great career.
I'm no good. I'll never be a magician.
Well, that's it for today's archive. Join me next time when I really feel the wrath of Lucille Ball's still quite rabid cult following. I really do like Lucille Ball. I Love Lucy was one of the first great TV shows. The Long Trailer was okay.
Everyone lately is making me crazy. Now that we've joined the deceased, there'll be no resting in peace, dear. Nearly departed, stumbling cockeyed, the moment that rock slide came tumbling down on our heads. Maybe we're better off dead, dear. It's hard to believe there's a family of three running amok in our home. They're constantly near.
I couldn't drive the car for him.
Oh, maybe it's better that way. The last time you drove a car, we ended up like this.